March 15, 1962. Frank Sinatra walked into Williams' soul food kitchen at 11:47 p.m. The whites-only sign hung crooked on the door. Every customer inside was black. Every eye turned toward the most famous man in America. What happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes. But those 4 minutes buried a body, saved a life, and created the most dangerous secret in entertainment history. The FBI opened a file. The mob made calls. And old Samuel Williams, who owned that little Birmingham diner, never spoke about that night again. Not to his son, not to his wife, not even to the priest who gave him last rites 30 years later. But secrets don't stay buried when they're worth $50 million. Someone always remembers. Someone always comes collecting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The blood on Samuel Williams's apron wasn't from the kitchen. It pooled dark against white cotton as he pressed his back against the diner's rear door, listening for footsteps in the alley. Inside, chairs scraped against linoleum. Nervous laughter. The jukebox had gone silent the moment Sinatra walked in, and now the only sound was the soft murmur of voices trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. Samuel's hands shook as he fumbled for his cigarettes. The body behind the dumpster wasn't moving anymore. Wouldn't be moving ever again. Tommy the Knife Marcelli had come collecting on debts that weren't Samuel's to pay, but debts had a way of finding new shoulders when the original borrower couldn't be found. "You know where your boy Ray is," Tommy had whispered, pressing the blade against Samuel's throat. "That college boy owes my people money. Big money. Time to pay up, old man." The fight had lasted 30 seconds. Tommy was younger, meaner, but he hadn't counted on the meat cleaver Samuel kept tucked behind his belt. Self-defense, the law would call it. If there was any law left in Birmingham that gave a damn about a black man's word against a white mobster's reputation, the bell above the front door chimed. Samuel pressed his ear to the wood, listening. "Evening, folks." That voice, smooth as Tennessee whiskey, famous as Christmas morning. "Mind if I sit?" Samuel heard Mrs. Patterson gasp. Her granddaughter giggled. Someone dropped a fork. He crept along the building's edge to peer through the kitchen window. There was Frank Sinatra, larger than life in his charcoal suit, sliding into booth 3 like he owned the place. Like he belonged. Like walking into a blacks-only establishment was something he did every Tuesday night. The singer's eyes found Samuel through the window. A slight nod, a message. "I saw what happened in that alley. I saw Tommy Marcelli bleeding out behind your dumpster, and I'm going to help you make this go away." "But why?" Samuel wiped his hands on his apron, leaving fresh smears. His customers sat frozen, unsure whether to run, call the police, or ask for autographs. Mrs. Patterson's grandson had his mouth hanging open like he was catching flies. "Coffee would be nice," Sinatra said, his voice carrying that easy confidence that made women swoon and men want to buy him drinks. "Black. Like I prefer my jazz clubs." The words hit different in a room full of black faces. A statement, a line drawn in Alabama sand. Samuel pushed through the kitchen doors, forcing his legs to work. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Tommy Marcelli's blood was still warm on his hands. The knife was still buried in the mobster's chest. And now Frank Sinatra was sitting in his diner, making jokes about integration while Samuel's life hung in the balance. "Mr. Sinatra," Samuel managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I think maybe you got the wrong place." Sinatra's blue eyes were colder than his voice suggested. "No, Samuel, I'm exactly where I need to be." The use of his name sent ice through Samuel's veins. They'd never met, never spoken. How did Frank Sinatra know a small-time diner owner in Birmingham, Alabama? "Pour the coffee," Sinatra continued, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "And sit down. We need to talk." Samuel's hands trembled as he filled 2 cups. The envelope was thick, heavy. Through the kitchen window, he could see police lights reflecting off the alley walls. Red and blue strobes cutting through the darkness. "They're here about Tommy," Sinatra said quietly, not turning around. "Question is, are you going to let them find what they're looking for, or are you going to trust me? I don't understand." "Tommy Marcelli worked for people I know. People who don't forgive debts. He came here tonight to collect money your son Ray borrowed for law school. Money he lost in a poker game in Chicago. Money that belonged to some very dangerous men. Samuel sank into the booth across from Sinatra. Ray never told me. Kids never do. Sinatra's smile was sharp as winter. But Tommy's dead now, and that creates a problem. For you, for me, for everyone in this room who's going to be questioned about what they saw tonight. The police knocked on the front door. Hard, insistent raps that meant business. Open the envelope, Sinatra whispered. Samuel's fingers fumbled with the clasp. Inside, photographs. Tommy Marcelli with his throat cut, but not by Samuel's cleaver. These pictures showed a different scene, a different killer. Someone in an expensive suit whose face was carefully angled away from the camera. Insurance, Sinatra explained. For both of us. The knocking grew louder, more urgent. Mr. Williams, Birmingham Police, open up. Sinatra leaned forward, his famous face inches from Samuel's. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell them I was here all evening. A planned visit, nothing unusual. And you're never going to speak about what really happened in that alley. Not to anyone. Not ever. And if I don't, then your son Ray doesn't make it to graduation. The photograph slipped from Samuel's fingers as the front door splintered open. The photographs scattered across the diner floor like fallen leaves, each one a glimpse into someone else's sin. Samuel Williams watched them slide under tables and behind chair legs as Birmingham police officers flooded through his broken door, their flashlight beams cutting harsh lines across familiar faces. "Evening, officers," Sinatra said, his voice carrying that easy authority that made even white cops pause. He leaned back in the booth, coffee cup steady in his hand. "Beautiful night for a drive through Alabama." Detective Morrison, a thick-necked man with tobacco stains on his shirt, stopped dead when he recognized the singer. His partner, younger and greener, reached for his holster before Morrison's hand shot out to stop him. "Mr. Sinatra? Sir, we weren't expecting—" Morrison's eyes swept the room, taking in the frozen faces of Samuel's regular customers. Mrs. Patterson clutched her purse like a shield. Her grandson still stared at Sinatra with wonder that transcended fear. Expecting what, detective? Sinatra's smile could have cut glass. A man can't enjoy a cup of coffee with friends? Samuel forced himself to breathe. His heart hammered against his ribs as he bent to collect the scattered photographs, making sure to keep them face down. Each image felt like holding fire. Tommy Marcelli's corpse, the mysterious killer in the expensive suit, evidence of a crime that hadn't happened the way it should have. "We had reports of a disturbance," Morrison said carefully, shouting from the alley. "Someone thought they heard—" "Must have been the music," Sinatra interrupted. "I was just telling Samuel here about a session I did in Chicago. Got a little excited, you know how it is when you're talking shop with fellow musicians." The lie slipped out smooth as silk. Samuel caught Sinatra's eyes and saw something there that made his stomach clench. Not kindness, but calculation. This wasn't mercy. It was business. "Samuel used to play piano," Sinatra continued, gesturing to the old upright in the corner. Samuel's fingers twitched involuntarily. He hadn't touched those keys in months, not since arthritis started claiming his knuckles joint by joint. Beautiful touch. Reminds me of Art Tatum, if Art had grown up eating cornbread instead of caviar. Mrs. Patterson laughed, despite herself, a nervous, fluttering sound that broke some of the tension. Morrison relaxed slightly, but his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging details he'd have to put in his report. "How did you explain Frank Sinatra in a colored diner without mentioning the body cooling in the alley?" "We should check the back," the younger officer whispered to Morrison. Samuel's blood froze. The photographs felt slick with sweat in his palm. Behind the dumpster, Tommy Marcelli waited with Samuel's cleaver buried in his chest. No amount of Frank Sinatra's charm could explain that away. "Already did," Morrison said quietly. "Before we came in. Found a vagrant sleeping it off back there. Probably what folks heard. Drunk stumbling around, making noise. Nothing worth our time." The younger cop looked confused, but the call said— The call was wrong. Morrison's voice carried an edge of warning. "Happens all the time in this neighborhood. People get jumpy. See shadows where there ain't nothing but moonlight." Samuel stared at Morrison, understanding flooding through him like cold water. The detective's eyes held the same calculation as Sinatra's. Everyone was protecting something. Everyone had skin in this game. Well then, Sinatra said, standing and dropping a 20 on the table. Enough money to pay for everyone's meal twice over. I should be heading back to my hotel. Early flight tomorrow. He paused, looking directly at Samuel. Thank you for the hospitality, Samuel, and the stories about your son. Ray sounds like a remarkable young man. Studying law at Howard University, wasn't it? The threat wrapped in silk. Ray's name spoken like a prayer and a curse. Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. Somewhere in Chicago, his boy was probably bent over law books, dreaming of a future where justice meant something more than who had the most money or the sharpest knife. Ray didn't know his father had just killed a man, didn't know Frank Sinatra was now part of their family history, didn't know that his gambling debts had painted a target on everyone he loved. Give him my regards, Sinatra said, buttoning his coat. Tell him Frank Sinatra believes in his future, and that some debts, well, sometimes they get forgiven in the most unexpected ways. The singer moved toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Samuel, you might want to get that lock fixed. Birmingham can be a dangerous place after dark. Morrison held the broken door open, nodding respectfully as Sinatra passed. Have a good evening, sir. Always do, detective. Always do. The police followed him out, leaving Samuel alone with his customers and the weight of photographs that shouldn't exist. Outside, car engines started. Voices faded. The night reclaimed its silence. Mrs. Patterson was the first to speak. Lord have mercy, she whispered. Was that really Frank Sinatra? Samuel slipped the photographs into his apron pocket. Yeah, he said, it really was. But as he swept up glass from his broken door, Samuel Williams knew this was only the beginning. Chicago, 2012. Ray Williams was dreaming of his father's piano when the phone rang. In the dream, Samuel's fingers moved like water across yellowed keys, pulling melodies from memory while cigarette smoke curled toward the diner's tin ceiling. The music wrapped around familiar voices, Mrs. Patterson arguing with her grandson, the coffee pot percolating, the soft scrape of chairs against linoleum. Home, before everything changed, before Birmingham became a word that tasted like blood and secrets. The phone's shrill cry cut through the melody like a blade. Ray's eyes snapped open to darkness, his heart hammering against his ribs with the automatic fear of a man who knew middle-of-the-night calls never brought good news. The red digits on his bedside clock glowed 2:47 a.m. Ray Williams. His voice came out rough. 78 years of living packed into 2 words. Silence, then breathing. Mr. Williams? Raymond Williams? Son of Samuel Williams? The voice was young, male, nervous. Ray sat up in bed, his arthritic joints protesting. Through his apartment window, Chicago's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and indifferent. Who is this? My name is Marcus Patterson. My grandmother was Dolores Patterson. She used to eat at your father's diner in Birmingham. Ray's blood went cold. Mrs. Patterson had been dead for 20 years, carried off by cancer that ate her from the inside out. She'd taken her memories with her. Or so Ray had believed. What do you want, son? I found something. In my grandmother's things. She left me her house, and I've been cleaning out the attic. There was this old shoebox wrapped in plastic, hidden behind the insulation. Ray's mouth went dry. His free hand found the glass of water on his nightstand, but his fingers shook too badly to lift it. Mr. Williams? You still there? I'm here. There are photographs, black and white, real old. And there's a letter from my grandmother. She wrote it to me, said I should only open it if something happened to her, if someone came asking questions about that night. The night. As if there had only been one night that mattered, one moment when everything tilted sideways and never straightened out again. Ray pressed his eyes shut, but he could still see it. His father's hands covered in blood, Frank Sinatra's cold blue stare, the weight of secrets that had shaped 50 years of careful silence. What kind of photographs? A man, dead, behind a dumpster. Someone cut his throat. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. And there's another picture. Someone in an expensive suit standing over the body. The face is turned away, but what? My grandmother wrote something on the back. The real killer. FS took the fall to protect his people. Samuel Williams saved us all by keeping quiet. Ray's world tilted. The phone slipped in his sweaty palm as understanding crashed over him like ice water. His father hadn't killed Tommy Marcelli. Frank Sinatra had. The famous integration story, the civil rights legend, the moment that supposedly changed everything. It was all a lie. A cover-up. A performance designed to hide murder. Mr. Williams? Where are you calling from? Birmingham. I live here now, bought my grandmother's house after she passed, but someone's been watching me. Ever since I found the box, black cars parked across the street, men in suits asking neighbors questions about my family. Ray's mind raced. 50 years. 50 years of living with the wrong truth, carrying guilt that wasn't his father's to bear. But if Marcus had found the photographs, if someone else knew, have you shown them to anyone? Just my girlfriend. We didn't know what to do, so we looked you up online. Found out you were a lawyer, that you lived in Chicago. My grandmother's letter said if anything ever happened, I should call Samuel Williams's son. Said you'd understand. Listen to me very carefully, Marcus. You need to leave Birmingham. Tonight. Don't pack, don't tell anyone where you're going. Just get in your car and drive. I can't just... They killed one man to keep this secret. They'll kill again. Ray's voice cracked. My father spent 30 years looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows. He died thinking he was a murderer when he was really just a man trying to protect his family. The letter says there's more, other photographs. Hidden somewhere your father told my grandmother about, somewhere in Chicago. She said if the Birmingham pictures ever surfaced, the Chicago ones would prove everything. Ray felt the walls of his carefully constructed life crumbling. 30 years as a civil rights attorney, fighting for justice while living with the lie of his father's supposed crime. And now this boy, this innocent kid, had stumbled into a truth that could destroy everything. Sinatra's legacy, his father's memory, and quite possibly Marcus himself. Mr. Williams? Are you there? Ray stared out at the Chicago skyline, knowing his quiet life was over. Yeah, son, I'm here. But he knew that after this call, nothing would ever be the same. Ray hung up the phone and sat in the darkness, his hands trembling like leaves in winter wind. The silence of his apartment pressed against him, thick and suffocating. Everything he'd believed about that night, about his father, about the weight he'd carried for 50 years, all of it was wrong. He stumbled to the kitchen, muscle memory guiding him through rooms he'd inhabited for 3 decades. The whiskey bottle sat where it always did, behind the coffee canister, waiting for nights when sleep wouldn't come. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Some truths are too heavy for one man to carry alone, son. But Samuel had carried it alone, had died believing he was a killer. Ray poured 3 fingers of bourbon and drank it standing at his kitchen window, watching Chicago sleep. Somewhere out there were more photographs, evidence his father had hidden, insurance against a truth too dangerous to speak. The city sprawled before him, millions of hiding places, and he had no idea where to start looking. The phone rang again. Ray's blood froze. Raymond? A woman's voice, cultured, careful. It's Miriam Chen. Ray's grip tightened on the receiver. Miriam had been his law partner for 15 years before her retirement. They'd fought side by side through a dozen civil rights cases, shared victories and defeats, and enough late-night strategy sessions to know each other's tells. She only called him Raymond when something was seriously wrong. Miriam. It's nearly 3 in the morning. I know what time it is. Her voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. I just got off the phone with Arthur Kellerman. Ray's stomach dropped. Kellerman was a federal judge, one of the few remaining from the old civil rights era. He'd been a young prosecutor in the 60s, cutting his teeth on integration cases when such work could end careers or lives. What did Arthur want? To warn me. To warn us both. Miriam's breathing sounded labored. Ray, someone's been asking questions about you, about your father. Federal agents, but not the kind who show badges or follow procedures. What kind of questions? The kind that made Arthur remember things he'd forgotten. Like how your father's case never made it to trial. How the evidence disappeared. How Frank Sinatra himself supposedly vouched for Samuel's character, claimed the whole thing was self-defense. Ray closed his eyes. The bourbon burned in his chest, but it couldn't warm the ice spreading through his veins. Miriam, don't. Her voice cut sharp as glass. Don't tell me anything over this phone. But Ray? Arthur said something else. He said there were always rumors about that night. Whispers that Sinatra hadn't just been an innocent bystander, that powerful people had reasons to keep certain stories buried. Through his apartment walls, Ray heard his neighbor's television, some late-night movie playing too loud. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives, unaware that old secrets were stirring like bones in shallow graves. Where are you calling from? A payphone outside Northwestern Hospital. My grandson's having his appendix out. Miriam's laugh held no humor. Funny how family emergencies make you careful about which phones you trust. Ray understood. They'd lived through enough cases to know how surveillance worked, how conversations could be recorded, how lawyers who asked the wrong questions sometimes found their licenses under review. What did you tell Arthur? Nothing, because I don't know anything. But Ray, her voice dropped to a whisper. He's scared, really scared. And Arthur Kellerman doesn't scare easily. The line went quiet. Ray could hear traffic in the background, the distant wail of an ambulance. Chicago never slept, but some secrets were stirring that should have stayed buried. There's something else, Miriam continued. A young man was found dead in Birmingham tonight. Marcus Patterson, 26 years old. Car accident, they're saying. Lost control on a curve, went straight into a tree. Ray's knees buckled. The phone slipped in his sweaty palm as the room spun around him. Marcus Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's grandson, the kid who'd called him 2 hours ago with photographs that could destroy everything. When? About an hour after his cell phone records show he made a long-distance call to Chicago. To your number, Ray. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ray sank into his kitchen chair, feeling every one of his 78 years settling into his bones. They'd killed Marcus for making that call, for trusting Ray Williams to help him. I need to see you, Ray whispered. No, you need to disappear. Miriam's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades keeping dangerous people alive. Whatever your father was involved in, it's not over, and now you're part of it. The line went dead. Ray sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the debris of a carefully constructed life that was crumbling around him. Outside, Chicago hummed with its endless energy, but Ray felt like he was drowning in silence. Somewhere in this city were photographs his father had hidden, evidence of a truth that had already cost one young man his life. And Ray knew that by morning, they'd be coming for him too.